Hi, guys. On my last talk covering the 90-day shit test, there was a lengthy comment left there by Andre358. I've linked you to a screenshot of the full comment below, but I will use a good bit of his words directly in this response. He had a lot to say, some of it very important and worthy of treatment here. To sum up that shit test talk, though, I served up the idea that all relationships had a turning point. A moment in time that determined the level of control that a woman would wield over a man for the duration of that relationship. And I offered up what I think was the most functional response for men to that moment, or rather, the response that I felt left the man most likely to remain in control of his life, even if it was at the expense of losing the woman. And in all that, I allowed for the fact that women are more likely to leave than to forsake the ability to control a man. Andre expressed some frustration about all this, and to be honest, what he had to say was not new to me. I've heard it before, many times, and I'm certain that I'll be hearing it again in the future. So with that said, I'll dive into this talk by reading the first couple of paragraphs of Andre's comment. I made a few grammar corrections for this reading, assuming that English is not Andre's primary language, but nothing that I think changes the meaning or intent of what he had to say. You can check the original and be the judge for yourself. Anyway, let's get started. See, that's the problem I have with all of the MGTOWs and MRAs, Andre says. None of this so-called red pill advice gives any positive solution when it comes to relations with women. Paul in particular, and don't get me wrong, I've watched a lot of his videos, does not directly advise his audience not to engage in relations with women, but after watching his videos, you inevitably end up with this conclusion. That's the end of the first paragraph, and I already feel the need to say that the point of my work was never to advise men to stay out of relationships with women. My point is to talk about men's relationships with women realistically and bluntly, which very few people do. I've also said on many occasions that relationships with women can serve men well, provided they have the balls and the character to assert their values against gynocentrism, hypergamy, and female privilege. Oh, and of course, that they don't get married. Now, many men do conclude that the work and risk involved with that sort of thing isn't worth it. And some, if we're going to maintain that brutal honesty, may conclude that they don't have the strength with women to stand up to those things, so they opt out too. Both kinds of men are making their own choices, not choices that I've tried to lead them to. There's much more to this, and I'll get to later, but let's go on with more of Andre's comment first. I've been aware of the dangers when it comes to relationships with women, he says. That's important and everyone should know it. But stopping there is not helpful to anyone who still wants to have a successful relationship with the opposite sex. That's why this kind of advice is useful only if they come with proper knowledge about male-female social dynamics, dating, sex, etc. I'm not saying that everyone should become a pickup artist, but proper education at some degree on that matter is an absolute necessity for every man in order to be safe and successful. In fact, all the problems, including the ones described in the video, are due to a lack of understanding and skills on the matter. And that is the end of Andre's first two paragraphs, and we are just getting a little bit closer to what I think he is trying to say, and closer to what I think is wrong with it. The problem here, as I am starting to understand it, is that Andre is trying to put a roof over his house before he's ever built the foundation. Let me see if I can put this in a different, more illustrative way. The problem here is that Andre, and I am betting millions of men just like him, is trying to understand the mechanics of how you attract relationships with women without having a firm grip on forming a successful relationship with himself. And I know this because the very questions he is asking are tell. Nobody with a conscious, healthy relationship with themselves is sitting around worrying about how to attract women. Please bear with me while I say that again. Nobody with a conscious, healthy relationship with themselves is sitting around worrying about how to attract women. In other words, the healthier the relationship you have with yourself, the more expendable relationships with women become. And there is, without a doubt, an inverse relationship between neediness in men and success with women. I'm just being honest and telling the truth, and the killer is women too will know this. They know this because they are typically most attracted to men who are not sitting around trying to figure out how to get women to accept them. They have radar that spots these men from miles off, and that spots secure, confident men in the same way. Women lean toward men who have accepted themselves and who don't worry much about women either way. And I'm not even knocking Andre for wanting to focus on attraction theory, seduction, game, or whatever you want to call it, PUA. I get all that. The problem with addressing that in one way is that without more information on Andre, we have almost nothing to go on. There could be a number of things preventing Andre from enjoying the blue pill version of success with women. He could be morbidly obese. He could be terminally insecure and tongue-tied around women. He could be somewhere on the autism spectrum, which often imposes a kind of social awkwardness that makes connecting with women more difficult. Or I could also just draw from his comment and conclude that he is projecting neediness that is turning women off. If that happens to be the case, I have two different lines of advice to offer. First, I did a 2-part talk on attracting women years ago, linked below. It is precisely about increasing your odds significantly with women. The approach I offered is solid and easy enough if you're not crippled by self-doubt and the aura of neediness. But here's the catch. What I suggested, just like all credible philosophy for attracting women, hinges almost exclusively on the degree with which men are capable of not giving a fuck whether women will accept them or not. As they say, the difference that makes the difference is indifference. Whatever the reason that you're experiencing trouble with the blue pill pursuit of women, you can't get away from that one. And I note that the kind of indifference required is the kind of indifference glaringly lacking from Andre's comment, which was saturated with the kind of insecurity that sends most women, even good ones, running. Whether a man ends up totally alone for life or whether he ends up with a harem, the attitude of indifference is still what will lead him to the most contentment, the most freedom, and the least susceptibility to harm. And the only way to get to that state of unfeigned, true life indifference is to live life and make choices like you matter more than any woman. One man with solid boundaries and the balls to back them up makes any number of borderlines disappear. Same for princesses, daddy's little girls, and feminists. And this is where I noticed that a lot of men who talk like Andre tend to quit listening the moment the idea of women going away rears its head. The point that these men seem to eternally miss is that they have inherent value that can and must be measured in the absence of women. And that, dear listeners, is a road too far for far too many men. The final giveaway for what I'm talking about happened at nearly the end of Andre's comment, where he said, and I quote, "It is really difficult to lead with your values or to be tough enough or even non-reactive in these kinds of situations if you've been single for so long and you have a really hard time getting a proper girlfriend." Unquote. And to this I say, if you can find an excuse to not lead with your values, then you don't have any values to begin with. Anything that expendable can't be real enough to guide you through life. I don't mean that to be insulting to Andre, but to be brutally honest, what he's saying is that he's too lonely, too needy to worry about values. And yet he wonders why he's not attracting women. Trust me, gents, this is not only a certain path to reducing your attractiveness to women, it is also the way you make yourself vulnerable to the worst that womanhood has to offer. Needy, gynocentric men get self-serving, gynocentric women every time. Even non-gynocentric men get gynocentric women, but they manage to attract a much better class of them. When Andre said, and I'm quoting him again, the problems, including the ones described in the video, are due to a lack of understandings and skills on the matter, he was deadly wrong. The problems I cover in my videos are ones that happen with women's acceptance, not their rejection. They're the problems you have once you're with a woman, not while you're looking for one. They are all problems that come with what blue pill men call success with women, not failure. Gynocentric neediness is the most common doorway to these problems, and a world full of men pass through that doorway every day of their lives. That's why my email box is packed full of pleas from men I cannot help. The only thing you can do about it, in my admittedly not so humble opinion, is find what your values are and live with them as close to every minute of every day that you can. And I don't think men can find their values if they don't first find their value. That is the crippling thing about how we socialize men into disposability for the sake of women. Through obedience to hypergamy, bowing to gynocentrism, and lauding men for sacrifice, we convince them from early on that they really aren't worth anything. It's the truest form of misandry, the socialization of men to hate themselves and to make them believe that their only redemption rises and falls on the whims of a woman. This whole puppy dog pursuit of women's approval, so typical to blue pill men, is nothing short of a public declaration of their lack of self-worth. Even when you dress it up with game, PUA techniques, or even pop psychology, it still boils down to men surrendering their personal value to the capriciousness of the female's fleeting fancy. Your value and your values are the best protector, the best advocate you've ever had for getting women, for getting rid of them, for mixing with them in a safer, more rational way. But you will never fully get that until you can accept that you're much better off without a woman than to be dependent on one for your happiness. In fact, the moment you quit relying on a woman to make you happy, you might just start discovering what real happiness is all about, and without robbing you of the ability to share life with someone else if you so choose. Andre, like I said, I understand the frustration you have, but this is the most complete version of the lesson there is. It's ugly, I'll admit, but it is what it is. The fact is that not giving a damn about the skills you want to develop with women is a hell of a lot better than trying to learn those skills. Waiting for women to come along and affirm your value is robbing you every day of understanding and accepting just how valuable you really are. There's a lot of people on the internet that will tell you something different, many of them with much bigger audiences than mine. But this is the only truth I know. And that is it for another talk. As always, I hope you all have enjoyed, even if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.